With Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, VolQuest.com, as Tennessee comes to Athens, Georgia today in hopes of showing everybody they had closed the gap, Austin, and that they were in for a 60-minute fight. The Bulldogs were. Tennessee leads this game at the half. The second half is all Georgia as Tennessee gets shut out. Bulldogs win 44-21. Is this just a case where Georgia's better?
Yeah, I do believe that. Especially Tennessee's defensive line, versus, Georgia's defensive line. I don't think Tennessee's offensive line is as bad as it played today. I think Georgia's defensive line is just that good. Tennessee's defensive line is a good defensive line, but to me that's the difference. Like, they could get to the quarterback, they could stop the run. They made Tennessee one-dimensional. Georgia at times was still able to run it. I don't know why Kendall Milton doesn't play more for Georgia. I think Zamir White's just an average running back. Sure not what he was when he was coming out of North Carolina in high school. But Georgia was able to make enough plays with Stetson Bennett, who again, is what he is. But when you play behind an offensive line that can protect, you have really good wide receivers, and a solid running game. You don't have to be an all-world quarterback.
Yeah, there were times that they gave Stetson Bennett some trouble and a couple batted balls, kept him pinned in the pocket. But he also made a couple plays with his feet. He hit some wide open targets. He threw the ball up for grabs a couple times that Tennessee did not capitalize on, where they had. Trayvon Flowers could have had an interception for sure. But he does what they need him to do. As for Tennessee's defensive line, there were times, Austin, as you mentioned, against the run, they were pretty solid. They gave up some stuff on the perimeter run. I thought Darrell Middleton showed up more today. Looks like he's in a little better shape. Solomon played a little better. They did some decent things at times, but they got put in bad situations in the second half. And then same old story. Georgia wins time of possession. Georgia wears you out in the second half. Tennessee was just, they were done.
Gassed. They were gassed. I mean, it was really just kind of, it is what it is.
It was bludgeoning. It was just slow.
I asked Henry, and he goes, we came here as a team. We're a team. And my point was not to have him throw him back on the bus, but my point is, just as a defensive guy, even if you're playing well, when you're on the field 2-1, at some point it catches up to you.
Yeah, certainly. It certainly did in this game, as it has in this matchup for several years now. Let's talk about the offense, because that's what everybody's going to want to talk about. Jerry Garantano was good in the first half, made all the right decisions. In the second half, he was beat up, thrown around, did not make the right decisions in the second half. Where does Jim Chaney in this offense go from here? Is there quote, major changes, we have major problems, or is this, we played a really physical, good team, and we're still developing our identity, but we're still okay where we are?
I think they're still figuring out who they are. Now, Jeremy said after the game, we're going to have this scrimmage tomorrow. We always plan on having this scrimmage tomorrow, and why is because so many of these players, the young guys, the freshmen, weren't able to, scrimmage in fall camp, so we really don't know what we have in some of these guys yet. I think he wants to see what he's got, and if a Jimmy Holiday or a Jimmy Callaway or Malachi Wideman can go out there and show what they got. I thought Morgan Joseph showed some stuff today, probably earned himself some more playing time. It makes a lot of sense, for Tennessee to kind of, I don't want to say go wholesale youth movement, because I think that would be silly. I mean, they're 2-1, okay? But at the same time, what's Tennessee struggle with at wide receiver? Getting off press man coverage.
What helps that? Huge concern coming into this
What
game.
helps that? Well, guys that can run. So, with Malachi Wideman physical, more physical, it allows you to do that. You can have, Callaway or Holiday, use their speed to showcase something. It bears looking at tomorrow, which I think, is a reason why they're doing it.
What do you think Bayless Jones is not being more of a factor as a wide receiver? I mean, they threw the one ball to him late down the field, but other than that, he's not a huge factor. Is it, you think that's just him still trying to grasp all the system and finding his way there? Because, he had a couple plays in that South Carolina game, you thought maybe there was a weapon there other than just a kick returner, but he's not been much of a factor, for whatever reason. And Josh Palmer's clearly their best player who makes the best contested catches, but I'm wondering if you see more of Jones, who's a veteran who's played, a lot of college football.
Maybe. I mean, they used him a certain way early in the year, and they've not really used him that
Right.
way since then. Like much like today, they didn't do the jumbo stuff a whole lot. And I get it. I mean, you can only do that so much, but when you can't run it at all and you can't protect, why not just go max protect and do it with the two guys that are actual linemen? You know, I mean, at the end of the day, Princeton Fant and Jacob Warner are only going to be able to do so much.
Yeah, and I thought Tennessee's running backs were poor in pass protection today.
Oh,
I thought
they
they were overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, they were. Again, Georgia's just at a different spot in their program. You look at their front seven on defense, and it's some of the names that you remember back from the recruiting process the last couple of years, some of their show ponies, and they're playing like show ponies. N'Kobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Aziz Ojulari, Adam Anderson. You can go right down the list. All these guys, were highly rated recruits, and they've developed them, and they are playing like, really good football. So, I mean, like, right now, they're just in a different spot than Tennessee's in. Tennessee's got to continue to figure out how to get defensive linemen. I said out there, I watched Zion Logue tonight. He didn't play a ton, but he plays a little bit. I think Tennessee could have used him. That was a mistake on Jeremy Pruitt's part to not go harder for him, and they slow played him and let Georgia and Alabama become a factor, and Georgia ends up getting that kid. He's from Lebanon. He grew up a Tennessee fan. He should be playing at Tennessee in a perfect world. It's not a perfect world. He's in Georgia now, but Tennessee's, they could use a big body like him. Everybody asked me in the chat, what do we got to show to get Amarius Mims? I don't think you can show him anything. I mean, the kid's been to campus 4 times. He can't take a normal visit. I think the worst thing that happened to Tennessee was the fact that they made their run, but they did it during a pandemic where he can't really meet with the coaches, can't hang out with the coaches. He's extremely close with this Georgia staff, not as much with Tennessee's. Where he's extremely close with Tennessee is the current commits and the current players. But that only goes so far. At the end of the day, those current commits and current players are either going to be competing against you in practice for playing time, or they don't control whether you get to the field and how much you develop. Players are going to look at coaches. TID, another example. He's watching this game. What defensive line do you think he wants to play for? Georgia's, that was just a total butt kicker. Tennessee did some decent things at the defensive line tonight, but it wasn't what Georgia showed. So Tennessee's got to learn to win those kind of battles. I think offensive line to offensive line, Tennessee looks similar to Georgia. I think defensive line to defensive line, Georgia's defensive line looks a lot better. Tennessee's got some bodies. They've improved the depth.
Roster's better across the board.
Roster's better across the board.
Right.
But to get to where Georgia's at, to get to where Alabama's at, and those are the two who are the class of the conference right now. And where are they the class of the conference at? Defensive line. Tennessee doesn't have any defensive linemen. Look at Auburn. I mean, not to that level. They have decent players. Okay?
Right.
I think they're above. They're good players. They're not great.
And they're
They're
better
good.
than they've been. They've got a number of
Yeah, so
positives.
don't take it and make it where I'm knocking them, because I'm not. But to get to that level, you've got to have great defensive linemen. Why was Auburn good last year? They had a great defensive line. When Florida's been good in past years, they had really good edge guys, coming off the edge. Tennessee's got to get back to where they have guys that can get to the quarterback without having to bring Alontae Taylor and Bryce Thompson off the edge every other play, which is what Tennessee did tonight a lot.
Yeah, they played a lot of games up front, a lot of twists, a lot of stunts, and different things like that to try to create some havoc. And they created it for a while, but Georgia found the answers to that, and then obviously overwhelmed Tennessee on the offensive front. And Tennessee just couldn't do anything to save him.
So many people brought up tonight on the board Will Friend and his relationship with Jeremy Pruitt, and is that hurting Jeremy because the old line a week ago was told to put a little French in it. They were total ass kickers. Tonight they were the opposite. They got the butt kick. So it's one game. I think if you flush it, I think again Alabama is the class of the conference. Georgia's a little bit behind them just because they don't have as good a quarterback. At the end of the day, Stetson Bennett is what he is.
Well, and Georgia's got to beat Alabama at some point.
At some point,
right?
And after that, I mean, it's kind of like all those teams are the same. Auburn, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida. Those teams are all kind of the same. And I would actually put Florida just above that group of teams, probably, if I was ranking them. But I mean, look at LSU. They lost a lot. They're 1-2 with losses to Mississippi State and Missouri. They lost a lot. They didn't lose that much. Defensively, they were a train wreck. I mean, allowing 40 points a game to Mississippi State, I get it. Costello come in, he threw 600 yards. Last week against Arkansas, Barry Odom shut him down. Missouri, who we saw last week, who was pedestrian, if that, put up 40 points, over 40 points on LSU. So, I mean, like, this league is still, and this season's still very gettable for Tennessee in those type of games. They just got to wash this one. Just wash it down. You got your butt kicked, and move on.
Yep, you're still learning to walk. You're in the crawling stages, and you're still learning to walk to get to this point to take care of Georgia. There's some positives to come out of this game with some young players, Morgan Joseph, some of those guys that you talked about. But there's some veterans who going to have to make sure this team stays together and gets ready to play, because there's still plenty in front of this team. And you said it, I think, on the 2-minute drill. The gauntlet's not here. This is not game one of the gauntlet. It sets up better for Tennessee than it has in years past.
In years past, it was Florida, Georgia. Look back in 2016, it was Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M at Texas A&M, and then Alabama. There's no gauntlet this year. It's Georgia, then Kentucky. Kentucky's a solid team. They could be 0-3 after tonight's game against Mississippi State. If that's the case, they're rolling into a stadium they've not won in since 1984. Tennessee's supposed to win next week. So, there's an easier type game, if there is such a thing in this league. Then you go Alabama, then you have an off week, then you have Arkansas. So, I mean, like, at the end of the day, Tennessee's got just to watch this, just put it out of their mind, and get it over with, because the second half is a nightmare, and at some point you wake up from all nightmares.
Yep, it was an ugly second half where Tennessee found themselves in a lead and thought you never know what might happen in the second half. And what happened is Georgia woke up and Georgia took care of business with Tennessee in the second half. Volunteers now back to Knoxville to regroup to take on the Kentucky Wildcats. Georgia, all their sights will be on next week's game, a showdown with Alabama. For Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs, VolQuest.com.